Okay, George Schandelmier Jr. I always emphasize the junior to honor my father, of course, and that great generation. One of 7 children, grew up in Rodeo. My father was the superintendent of the 2-school district, and 5 sisters and 1 brother, and it was an ideal childhood. Some of those childhood friends, Ralph Alvarado, one of them is here now, and it was an idyllic time that will not be replicated again. Well, I didn't start till I think I was in 6th grade, a late start. One of my classmates invited me to join the team, and I really had never followed basketball before then. So I got on the team and started playing, and immediately found that I enjoyed it greatly and kept playing after that. I guess it would be center, since I was the tallest player on the team in most cases. In those days, people were quite a bit shorter than the average player is today. When I first came here, it was sort of intimidating because there was the hierarchy of players. Senior players, when I was a sophomore, I think held a very strong sway in the coach's mind, and he played them all and wanted to keep them playing. So it was never something I anticipated or thought about making the team when I was a sophomore. You just went out and played the game. You enjoyed it, and you didn't have any aspirations. You didn't look down the road. You didn't think about college. You just played the sport, whatever it was. And I think every player that on the team played multiple sports. Some played all 3. So it was just something you did naturally. You enjoyed them, and there was no ulterior motive like there is today with parents trying to intercede with a 5-year-old thinking they're going to play professionally, that you just played because you loved it. I remember before we started, we had a meeting, and our coach, Lou Signer, pulled out a newspaper clipping, and he said, here, John Swett is predicted to finish last in the league. Their best player is Ted Hunt. Of course, that was Tommy Hunt. And we ended up finishing 2nd that year. So that was some stimulation and some incentive for us. But again, it wasn't an all-consuming experience or part of our lives, in my view. It was a great introduction. I think our first game was in Pleasant Hill. We played Pleasant Hill High School, and we barely lost, but to play with Tommy and Dominic Angelo and Art Cooper, Bill Kirkhouse, it just got off to a real good start. I think all the players did revere the coach, certainly after Lou Signer. He was an ex-Marine, and as it has been mentioned, a small guy, 5'6", but anyone that went to John Swett during his era would probably recall instances where he would take a much larger male student, throw him up against the wall, and say, you better change your behavior, and that student would change their behavior. He had the respect of all the students and athletes. But he was, as I said, a Marine, so we ran a very disciplined offense. We did try to fast break, but as Steve has mentioned, it was a box weave, pass and screen away, just repetitively over and over, no shot clock. We might go a minute without shooting, and finally someone would get a decent shot, because I recall if you took anything more than a 15-foot shot, you might get pulled out of the game. So very disciplined, very methodical, but fundamentally tremendous education. I think it planted the seeds of continuing to play and to enjoy the game to an extent that I would play it as long as I could, I think until I was 40. But that love of the game, of competition, of the camaraderie, that was instilled in me, I think, by those 2 years on the varsity. Teammate Tommy Hunt, he got a scholarship to Gonzaga, and then I got a scholarship to Gonzaga also, and played there for 3 years, and then I got injured, switched over to Sonoma State, and played my final year there on a team that was just inducted into the Hall of Fame. So it was a great experience to play in college, and then after that I played recreational adult leagues for as long as I could. I remember coming and watching them play and taking road trips to see them in the playoffs, and was very impressed with their talent and capabilities. So they were a very outstanding team. And I never looked at it in any kind of comparison because they won their league and went on to the playoffs. We didn't. We finished second, and even had we finished in first, there was no playoff format. We probably would have maybe have gone to the TOC where all teams, there was no divisional breakdown, and that would have been a tough experience. But they were an outstanding team, and I'm glad that I got to see him play. If he did, I don't remember. The contact I had with him wasn't that extensive. As you mentioned a few times, up at Vera's, a few drinks there, and just conversation. So we didn't discuss his team or the success they had as far as I remember. Very impressed with the teamwork, the passing, the cohesiveness. It was amazing. I was very impressed, loved to watch you guys play, and the success level was abundant. I didn't get a chance. I had idols that I saw here at John Swett. Charlie James was one of them, but never got John Frost a couple of years later, but never got to play in any pickup games with him. I don't know if there just weren't opportunities, there weren't leagues, I just wasn't aware of any opportunities, so I didn't really get into the gym until much later. I think it was pretty standard for John Swett teams. It didn't take many people to fill the place up. There wasn't that much to do in Crockett and Rodeo on a Friday night. So I think there was good support. I still see some of the fans from that era, and they still remember it, but there are not many of them left. Right. I think so, and as I say, it didn't take many to fill this up. One person shouting could reverberate and echo and sound like 20, the pep band. So it was very loud and raucous, and it was a great experience to play with that type of fan base. There were some comments. I remember meeting a guy I had played against from Amador, and he addressed me, "Hey, you're a former Indian," and he mentioned it was tough playing here, but I'm sure it was with the lack of space. Nowadays, you see people going under the baskets after shots. They'd be carried out in a stretcher nowadays if they did that here. You'd have more paraplegics than you would have ambulatory people. Well, I don't know. It was what we had. Yeah, not in any respect that was unsportsmanlike, but he taught the fundamentals to an extreme that I benefited greatly. When I went to college, I remember people asking me, your feet are moving so fast, how'd you do that? And it was just a basic lesson that I'd learned from Lou, blocking out, hitting the outlet, running into the lane, and they were not fortunate enough to have a coach that emphasized that aspect. As I said, it was a slow down offense. We didn't have the freedom that might have been available in other teams or other coaches, but if you had the fundamentals, then you could grow from there. I don't know what the enrollment, but I'm sure they were all twice, 3 times. When you look at the teams Steve has mentioned, Amador, Liberty, Granada, Albany was in the league, so they must have all had twice or 3 times the enrollment. But we never focused on that, or it was never mentioned. Not that often. Many of the ones that would have probably passed away or moved away, and very few recall those days. Just a handful of people that many of who are here right now would remember, but those are strong memories and important times of our lives. Maybe not like future teams would have. As I said, everybody played multiple sports, and I don't think it had the impact that when you're playing 3 sports or 2 sports, like one sport athletes would have now. There would be more emphasis on the experience, but in those days you just went from one sport to the next, you enjoyed it, and you didn't have any dreams or anticipation of going beyond that season. Yeah, he had gone ahead of me, and so my senior year, I remember that Coach Signer he moved me to forward because I think he anticipated there was some possibility of me playing in college. So that was the first step in anticipating playing beyond high school. And then even my senior year, I was figuring I'll go to Contra Costa College and play. But then the coach came down, made me an offer, and you can't refuse a free education, so I accepted and went up to Spokane.
What was your family's response to that?
Nothing great, just they were happy for me, but again, no, with being one of 7 children, there was no real favoritism. I don't think my dad came to one of my games in high school, my mother came to 0, so it wasn't like, it wasn't a big thing in those days. It was like going to the store and getting a loaf of bread, so what? So nobody really followed it. My sisters were here, one of them at that time, so she came to the games, but again, it was something more of an individual pursuit. That was a different experience. Again, I had a coach there, Bud Presley, a renowned coach, and again, a very disciplined World War II veteran, also wore some heavy-duty shoes that he utilized for impacts when he didn't see things his way, but my teammates there, a lot of them were all state, of course, smaller states, Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, so they came from a much smaller pool. But then I was also in contact with the varsity players, and that was because they were much taller. So that was an eye-opener just to begin that career there. No, you can easily get caught up in what if you do that. I probably would have practiced more or gone to other locales to play more pickup instead of just playing against the same group, and that wasn't that frequent either. I think I played more after college when we had access to the local gyms, and we had a regular date that we would play, and I think that's what I would have done differently, played more against different competition. Just that it was a different era. I loved watching the '77 team. Unfortunately, some of my teammates have passed away from that '67 team, but I still keep in touch with some of them and some of the classmates, and it was a great experience, and I have fond memories of that time. I would say the '77 would have prevailed just because the style of play had evolved and the coaching was different. So if we were both playing in the same era, it might have been very close. But their outside shooting and the fact that they were allowed to shoot from the outside, I think would have been the deciding factor. I think initially, but given they've been raised with this style, with the shot clock, 3-point, so it would take some time to adjust, but I think it still would be competitive because I don't know that the coaching is going to be the same. When you have the shot clock, you're not going to have the attention to the detail, attention to the fundamentals that we were subjected to.
Right. Nobody's learning the four-corner stall.
That's a good thing, but I think the game is faster paced now, far more shots, but the fundamental aspects may have been lost in that transition. Yeah, I remember I was a little apprehensive because they had a couple guys 6'5" and 6'4", and a lot of physical ability, but once the game began, they didn't compete with us. Well, I would thank you, Jeff, for coming up with this idea and implementing it, and Steve for doing all the research that he has done and bringing back the ghosts from the past, especially the one coach he mentioned that coached 4 sports for 30 years. That's never going to happen again.
He might even coach more. Yeah,
That's why we revere that generation.
right.
Yeah, there was no ulterior motive or dream. You played in the moment, you played for that season, and beyond that, you went on to the next day, the next sport, the next activity.